I would always advise companies to look at consultants before they look at agencies. And I think and this is kind of what large companies do now. And I think this also reflects the way that the market has changed. There's a lot of senior people like me, who've been in the industry for many years. And the nature of agency is very much, it's a pyramid. So what happens with agency is that there's a few senior people at the top, but largely agency is built up on generally sort of younger people who are learning how to do marketing. And that works very well if you know specifically what you need and specifically what you want them to do, then that model is fantastic. If you need to come up with your plan first, then I would say it's always worth thinking about consultancy and thinking about having a step back and going into a planning stage, because most businesses don't do this. They'll jump straight away to, let's go and do SEO. What do we do? Well, let's hire an SEO agency. They jump straight away to the execution, and that's not the best way to go to do this properly, I would say.
Welcome to the B2B Lead Gen Podcast, your weekly audio masterclass on converting leads to revenue. I'm your host, Eric Schwartzman, author of The Digital Pivot. Let's do this. Our guest is Nick Wilsdon from TorquePartnership. He's a digital marketer and strategist with 20 years of performance marketing experience working for enterprise clients and global brands. He's a subject matter expert on cross-platform campaigns, and he's assisted on major digital transformation projects. He's also a speaker, a blogger, a contributor to industry publications such as The Drum, Reuters, and the Moscow Times.
There's going to be a question.
I said because I'm a US guy, so I had to, ham it up there.
You need a drum roll there, Eric. Yeah.
He's an industry judge for the UK Search Awards and the European Performance Awards. He is passionate about digital performance, integrated campaigns, and figuring out how to read the tea leaves. Nick, welcome.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. You came highly recommended by Juliette Van Rooyen, who did another episode of this podcast, and she was fantastic. And I said, if you're as smart as you are, you have to tell me who else I should talk to. And she didn't hesitate. She said you.
Cool, that's a high bar. But yeah, Juliette is a fantastic marketer. And the work she does is very, very impressive.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about the inside SEO strategies of Vodafone, eBay, and Estee Lauder, how to hire an SEO, and why big changes at Google could make or break your search engine visibility after this. Our guest is Nick Wilsdon. He is a consultant at TorquePartnership who serves major brands. Nick, how is enterprise SEO different from small business SEO?
Yeah, that's a good question, Eric. It is different, absolutely. And I think over the years, I've kind of realized it's different because it involves a lot of different aspects that you don't normally need to think about with SME. And you have the technical side, and I'd say that enterprise is dominated by technical SEO because these kind of sites, they're huge. They get links automatically, naturally. Sometimes, thousands of links at a time. So link acquisition isn't really as important for them. They've got the authority. Usually the thing that's holding them back is tech SEO and implementing that. And then that leads to the third thing, getting things done. And getting things done at enterprise is a whole separate subject. It's very complex. And I think some people look at enterprise sites and they notice that, you could fix this or you could fix that. And they have to understand that there's a lot of process and politics behind that to get those things fixed. So it takes a huge amount of strategy and thinking to kind of push that through those organizations.
What are some of the common challenges in enterprise SEO that don't present themselves in small business SEO?
It's the scale of it. It's scale of it and putting those fixes in place. You have changes that you need to make to the site. We have many different teams and interests across the organization. So you have to have a very strong business case in terms of why you're making those changes. And the certainly kind of a very senior level in enterprise, it involves you having an understanding of the commercial nature of the business far more than most sort of technical SEOs. So you have to have a balance there between your technical knowledge, but also an understanding of what the business is trying to do and what the objectives are through the business. So it's that kind of, you have to balance those things much more. And your soft skills. I think we talk a lot about soft skills now in SEO. And I think it's something that we need to emphasize for younger people coming up in the industry, that you can be incredibly technical, and that's fantastic. But if you can't convey the value of what you're trying to do to senior stakeholders, then you're never going to move up in your career, and you're never going to make these kind of projects land.
So you've been doing it 20 years. I've got to think that the folks you're communicating to have become more knowledgeable about SEO over the years. Is that the case?
This question might get me in trouble, but it's interesting. I mean, SEO has built a good reputation for itself. I mean, it's never been as good for SEO as it is now in 2021. People acknowledge that SEO is important, but still, when you go to very senior levels of a company, you're still advocating for SEO. You're still trying to convince them about the value of this, because you will find even very senior people who still don't fully understand it. They don't fully understand how SEO works, and they think this is still free traffic, or this is still something that will come naturally through Google, or why doesn't Google bend to what we want to do rather than we have to bend to Google? So you kind of get these various sort of approaches and attitudes at very, very senior level. So yes, I think overall SEO is acknowledged far more now than it ever was. Every major site has 3 sources of income now. It's direct, you're paid, SEO. Those are your 3 pillars for every enterprise site. And I think that is acknowledged now, but there is a large part of your job that is advocating for SEO and still convincing people.
When you are convincing people at the top, how does that conversation change if you're talking to a CFO versus a CEO?
Yeah, it does. It changes for every stakeholder that you speak to. And I'd say definitely, I mean, for the C-suite in general, the commonality is that you're linking it to the commercial value of what you're doing. And you're stripping back the technical jargon to really explain to them that, if we do this, we will get X% increase in sales, in revenue. And you have to be able to take your SEO to that level. But I say also you balance, because with every SEO program that I run, you have basic SEO, best practice SEO that all of us SEOs know. We all understand what needs to happen. We understand about implementing meta, canonical tags, redirects. We understand all this. And then we have the kind of shiny objects over here, which are the things that the business gets excited about because it's new. And that may be, improving local SEO, it may be improving omni-channel, app indexing, mobile search. It can be any of these sorts of topics. Schema at the moment is something that I talk a lot to businesses about, because we're changing the way that the web works right now. We're going from a web of things to a web of strings to a web of things. We're moving towards a semantic web, and this is a huge change that we're seeing now. Google used to index and retrieve information from documents, and we're now moving to retrieving information from various sources and putting a lot of that straight into search as well. So that's really changing the way that businesses think about their data and think about their information and how they use that online.
For someone who's new to search engine optimization, who's listening to this and maybe has more of a basic understanding of how search works, what is schema?
Oh, schema. Well, this does feed into semantic search, because schema is a way of us describing information on a page. And Google, or we always wanted to have a kind of universal way of describing that information, because if you think about information on your page, it's very difficult for Google to kind of go into your page, have to read through the text, and how do they really understand that? And understanding and getting that contextual knowledge is very difficult. So if you imagine I could then take your reviews that you have on your site, and I could mark them up in a way that was universally understood to make them reviews. And then Google would look at that schema, that markup, and it would know that they're reviews. It would know the rating, the aggregate rating, the content of your reviews, and it would then take that data and maybe put it into stars in the search results. So Google can then interpret that schema. And people have really seen schema in that kind of very basic way for quite a while, where they see Google releases a search feature that is powered by schema. And I think 50% or more search features are now powered by schema. And they try and put the schema on their page to capture that search feature, because they know if they have the stars in the search or they have that extra bit of real estate, they're going to get more clicks. But a true understanding of schema goes beyond that, because a true understanding goes, we're not just going to mark up the piece of information that Google wants to display in search. We're going to mark up all our information and the relationships that it has with itself. So if I'm a telco, for example, and I have a package, a broadband package, what does that mean? How does Google know what that broadband package is? It's a brand name. So schema would allow me to let Google know in a machine readable way that brand name was a broadband package sold by a telco for this much on a monthly subscription. I can tie all that information together, sold by this brand. And that's a very powerful thing, because that's where Google is heading with schema. They want to understand the world's information and the relationship between those pieces of information. And this is why really getting into schema in 2021 is an essential thing for most online brands.
If you're listening to this and you're panicking because you don't know how to do schema, if you're a WordPress user, there is a popular plugin called Yoast. We actually had the president, the CEO of Yoast, Mariak van der Acht, on the program recently. You can download that episode, but that tool will actually write the schema for you. And if you're a WooCommerce user, they'll do it for your product catalog as well. But I imagine if you're creating schema for an enterprise like Vodafone or eBay, that's all custom scripting, yes?
It has to be. It has to be custom scripting. And you're absolutely right. Yoast does a fantastic job with schema. I know Jono Alderson, he's part of Yoast, and they do create some fantastic schema, and they make it very easy for WordPress users or other people on those CMSs to produce it. But certainly when you get to enterprise level, we have to write it all from scratch. We have to create it ourselves, and that brings with it other problems in terms of scalability. How do we get that schema onto the site? And we've done schema deployments through Tag Manager, which was something that I pioneered, or pushed. I wouldn't say pioneered, but I was one of the people pushing this many years ago as a method to apply scalable schema to an enterprise site, where we could deploy it through the Tag Manager, and we could then use triggers to fire that schema on different URLs. So effectively, we used Tag Manager as the CMS for schema. And then
you dumb that down for me, because I know of Tag Manager. I'm not a user. I've never used it. So dumb it down for me and explain to me exactly what you're saying here about how you would use Google Tag Manager to deploy schema for an enterprise website.
Yeah, and this is if you imagine your Tag Manager system has the ability to fire and put different bits of information onto different pages in the same way that it paints on, say, your Google Analytics code. You could equally get it to paint on, a link to your podcast on every other page or a certain group of pages. You could do that all automatically through your Tag Manager. So you could use your Tag Manager to deploy information across your site. And this then allowed me to think in a scalable way about producing schema. So I worked with deploying it in Tag Manager. I was one of the first people to work with Telium, which is an enterprise competitor to Google Tag Manager, to deploy their schema deployment tags as well. So this is a way of us kind of having a set of schema and then saying that we want to apply this pattern, because it would be dynamic, to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages at one time. It's interesting though that now that's kind of moved on. So a lot of people who used to do deployments in Tag Manager, in the Tag Manager layer, they're now looking at Edge, and I do a lot in terms of Edge Ops, Edge operations. And we're now, things that we would have deployed previously at the Tag Manager level, we're now thinking about deploying at the CDN level. And sort of CDNs, Cloudflare, Akamai, Fastly. These are the big CDNs.
And these delivery network. networks.
Content delivery, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
And so with a content delivery network, their initial purpose was to deliver content. So they would deliver content to the user
right?
faster.
Their
The closest place.
To expedite the experience. So if you had a lot of big files, you could house those at servers closer to the user.
Exactly. Yeah. And so your user in India would go to a server in Mumbai when they made a request, and they would get this file very fast. And what's been the dramatic change in terms of Edge has been that they want to move from merely serving content to allowing you to run Edge apps in that environment. So we could start to paint on schema, we could do redirects, we could do renaming of URLs, we could do A/B testing. We can do all of that now in the Edge. And this is where I spend a lot of my time because Edge Ops is very much enterprise level. And this comes round to Torque and my ethos of finding kind of scalable solutions for large enterprise. So how can we find a solution that will allow you to fix these fundamental SEO problems? And so, I'm moving up into the different layers to allow that to happen.
So small businesses obviously are just trying to get noticed. I mean, it's tough to get inbound links for a small business. If you're Vodafone, I imagine it's a lot easier. But at small business, often the strategy is to create informational or educational content in hopes of luring links to that type of content that can then transfer that link authority over to a product page. But I imagine with enterprise, you're just SEOing the product page, yeah?
You are doing that as well. You're still doing that. That technique is a tried and trusted technique. I mean, to bring links into a certain page, but then the internal links for any site, whether it's an enterprise site or a small business site, those internal links are absolutely fundamental. And you should be always thinking, if you have highly linked pages and you're going out with something that does attract links, where am I linking to internally from that page? Because it is a very potent technique. I'd say your internal linking is always something that's very much overlooked. We see a lot of people focusing on gaining links, but we don't really think about what we're doing with the link equity that we have already. We don't think about reclaiming links, because when a link goes dead and it goes to a 404 page, that link no longer transfers any equity to our site. So as a small business owner, what are you doing to recover those links that are coming into your site? How are you making sure that you monitor them with some of the tools that are out there to make sure that they're always live? Because it's far easier to do link recovery and to monitor and maintain your current linking database than it is to go out and get more links. So that's something I think all businesses should be thinking about, enterprise or not.
Nick, what is a cross-platform campaign?
Cross-campaign campaigns are, I think it's just the thing that always I hated in digital in general, and probably agency, was the silos that exist. And there's always silos between different teams. So the SEO team does something completely on its own. The PR team does something completely on its own. It's very siloed. And I think my enthusiasm for cross campaigns has always been to get clever people working together and work out how we can create a campaign that really becomes omni-channel, because we know that users don't come in from SEO channels and completely attribute to SEO channels. We know that a user has touch points. They're going to come in. They may come in through SEO on an informational query. They may want to learn more about your product. And that's what SEO is really good at. SEO is good at getting those people who want to understand what you sell. And then that same user may come back in through a paid advert because they're ready to convert. And then your paid advert has the attractive offer in it to pull them in and get them to convert at that moment. But these channels work together. They don't work alone. And I think all campaigns should be thinking about cross-channel and omni-channel. That really should be how we think about it. And this was especially true for telco, because you imagine a lot of people in telco, they want to buy a very expensive handset. They're not cheap. They're 2-year subscription on some of these handsets. And you would go in, you would want to see the phone. So you may have done some research on organic before. You may then walk into the store, look at a handset, talk to the assistant. You may not even purchase at that point. You may then come back out the store and then purchase online through a PPC ad or even an upgrade through your account. So, these are omni-channel ways of thinking about selling. And I think everyone who works online has to be a lot more open to the fact that they need to get their channels working together to make them efficient.
How much enterprise SEO costs, how to hire an SEO, and the SEO strategies of Vodafone, eBay, and Estee Lauder with Nick Wilsdon, consultant at Torque Partnership. When we come back, stay with us. We're talking to Nick Wilsdon. He is a consultant at Torque Partnership with clients such as Vodafone, eBay, Estee Lauder, and Tommy Hilfiger. Nick, what types of things do you do for eBay?
Oh, well, I obviously couldn't go into specifics, but eBay is about scale. And I don't think I've ever worked on a site at that scale that eBay has. And I think that's been all with teams that are that clever and enthusiastic. It's a fantastic bunch of people at eBay. I absolutely love working with them. And I'd say for them, they have to think more than anyone, more than any enterprise that I've ever been in. They have to think about scale, and they have to think about solutions that will sort of slowly move the ship in the right direction. It's very hard with a site the scale of eBay to go in and fix individual things that you would find. And I think this gave me a real understanding towards Google, actually working with eBay, because as an SEO, we used to get very frustrated because we'd look at Google and we'd say, well, these search results, these are clearly wrong. You know, this isn't working. We'd all fire off reports to Google or would always complain on social media. And you start to understand that a site like Google is so complex that they can't fix individual things. They have to start thinking, you know, how do we then tweak the algorithm, or how do we tweak our approach, or do we create another system to slowly fix this thing? And this is how the largest sites on the internet think. They can't think in terms of small individual fixes. So it made me a lot more sympathetic, I think, towards the Google engineers, having worked in that sphere with eBay.
It's interesting. When you think about an eBay listing, I mean, my assumption, and I'm not that active on eBay, is that they would be temporary listings because they're auction pages. So they don't really live very long. They're there for a short period of time. So how does that impact how you approach trying to get those pages to rank in search?
Yeah, that's true. They deal with a lot of temporary content. They have a lot of permanent content as well. I mean, there's both types of content within it. So they do have to have different approaches for all the different types of content really across a site like that. But yeah, it's something you have to think about a lot in terms of your relationship with Google, because the size of the site means that you have a lot of content in Google, and that makes that relationship quite interesting, because people talk a lot in terms of enterprise. Within enterprise SEO, we can start to think about crawl budget. We can think about the amount of effort that we're spending on bots going through our site, because these things at that scale start to make a material difference to the business. You know, for a small site, you know, allowing, you know, not worrying about your crawl budget doesn't particularly matter. And I think John Mueller and other Googlers have said this very clearly. If you're a small, medium business, small site, your crawl budget just shouldn't be a concern to you. But certainly for an enterprise site, it's a massive concern, because we're constantly trying to index and crawl very large amounts of content, millions and millions of pages. So that is a challenge definitely at eBay.
So, you know, eBay's been around since the beginning. So you would expect that would be a very sophisticated client with people working there that, you know, you're not explaining the value of search there. I mean, they get it.
No. Yeah. And I'd say that's probably why I love the team so much. They really do get search. They get SEO 100%. And that is probably the first enterprise client that I've worked with who 100% understands the importance of SEO.
Sure.
It's a very, very informed team there.
On the flip side, you know, you think about a company like Estee Lauder, which, you know, I don't want to, you know, be unfair, but my assumption would be, they're from the fashion world, beauty. They're not going to get it. They're going to choke on concepts. You're going to be doing a lot of hand holding, a lot of explaining. Plus, I don't even know if they sell direct to consumers. I mean,
they do. Yeah,
they do.
Absolutely.
But most of their business is through channel partners, I would imagine.
Yes, that's true. Yep, they do. And especially same in the UK, they have a lot of channel partners. They all in the UK, Boots, other people will be selling products from Estee Lauder. So they have quite a complicated business model, in the sense that they do have these channel partners. They have an awful lot of their brands are sold through other brands offline. in department stores, and I suppose you have the same thing in the US. They definitely they sell direct as well, and they do get SEO. Absolutely. I think the challenge at somewhere like Estee Lauder companies is, again, the scale. It's a different kind of scale. The challenge that they have. I don't think a lot of people realize that Estee Lauder companies is 28 plus companies within it. It's there's a lot of different sites within that network, and it's actually very similar to some of the work that I used to do at Vodafone in terms of managing the global search program, because I manage that across 23 countries globally, and it's a very similar kind of challenge. How do you do, if you're an SEO, how do you create a scalable program that you can then roll out and gradually increase the best practice that's going on through that entire network? And that's a very different challenge than you usually get as an SEO, because sometimes it's only partially about fixing things. It's more about how do I scale this? How do I fix all these things? And how do I create these processes? How do I build this capability within this organization to keep improving the level of SEO? And that really got me into my thinking about test and learn, which again came from my experience with management consultancies. And management consultancies spend a lot of time with the kind of clients that I work with, and they're very good at models. They exceed themselves at that. So the McKinseys, Accentures, these guys really understand business, and they understand how to get things done because they understand the models that they need to convince senior management that they need to do these things. So I learned a lot from working very closely with those guys and agencies. And I kind of took some of those learnings into SEO, into the technical sphere that I'm in. So I'd start to think about how could I roll out test and learn projects really across a large organization, because an organization like Vodafone would always listen very carefully to a case study that was done within Vodafone. Because and that meant you could pick up a small market. So you could go and work with Albania or a market of this size, and you could help them implement SEO best practice, and you could then take that case study and then use it to create the business case for rolling out in a larger market like Spain or UK. And then I'd constantly roll these test and learn waves on different tactics across the organization. But still with a kind of strategic view across measurement, how we're going to measure this, how we deal with data, and how do we deal with what's changing in the future of SEO? How do we keep ahead? You spoke initially about sort of steering the course in terms of SEO, and I think in SEO at that level, you always have to have one eye on what's changing in the next few years, so that you're ahead of it. Because unlike smaller businesses where you can jump very quickly to those changes, in a large enterprise, you need to be thinking about these things in terms of quarters or even years in some cases.
So Shopify signed up more new users in the first quarter of the pandemic than I think they had in terms of velocity. The growth was formidable, and their stock price shot through the roof. So, e-commerce is on the rise. Small and mid-sized businesses are trying to get into the game. Obviously, you've been doing this a long time, but there are a number of companies out there that, aren't Vodafone, that aren't Estee Lauder, that have 10, 20, 30,000 SKUs in an e-commerce store. Maybe they're drop shipping. What advice do you have for those types of companies that are still trying to get their arms around how to apply the type of knowledge you've acquired to their business? And also, I'd appreciate it if you would give us a figure. What should a company like that expect to pay to hire someone of your ilk to come in and SEO their product catalog?
Yeah, it's my exact prices. It's a good question, though, Eric. I think
a range. You can give us a range.
I'll give you a range. There's never too late to start doing e-commerce. I think we've always said that people sometimes feel they've missed the boat, and they haven't. Every year I've been in this for 20 years, that year's been the year to launch e-commerce. I think what's happened with the pandemic has been exceptional in the sense that digital has gone from, it's just leapt ahead 10 years, and we've become digital first. And I think that's partly because of the lockdowns and the uncertainty, but it's also because companies have finally made that transition. They've realized that, we need to get the digital side of our business working because we don't know what's going to happen in the next few years. And I've got that feeling in a lot of the people I talk to really at very senior level. We don't know if you're going to go in lockdown this year. We don't exactly know what's going to happen next year. So having your digital in order is absolutely essential. In the UK, Black Friday and Christmas were closed offline. We only had digital. So that's the first year that digital owned those spaces. It was amazing. So digital has had a huge push in this last year. And I think when people kind of joke about what has caused business transformation, has it been the CEO, the CTO, or COVID? That's the joke. It's definitely been COVID. It's pushed us 10 years ahead. But the advice is to, I would advise companies to look at consultants before they look at agencies. And I think and this is kind of what large companies do now. And I think this also reflects the way that the market has changed. There's a lot of senior people like me, who've been in the industry for many years. And the nature of agency is very much, it's a pyramid. So what happens with agency is that there's a few senior people at the top, but largely agency is built up on generally sort of younger people who are learning how to do marketing. And that works very well if you know specifically what you need and specifically what you want them to do. Then that model is fantastic. If you need to come up with your plan first, then I would say it's always worth thinking about consultancy and thinking about having a step back and going into a planning stage, because most businesses don't do this. They'll jump straight away to, let's go and do SEO. What do we do? Well, let's hire an SEO agency. They jump straight away to the execution. And that's not the best way to go to do this properly, I would say. So as a large company, or even as a medium-sized company, I would take the time to talk to a consultant, really establish a plan and a blueprint for what you're trying to do, and to understand, how are you going to do SEO? What kind of SEO do you need? Is it technical SEO? Is it link building? Is it content? What are you doing on paid? What channels are you using for paid? How is paid working with your organic channels? Just to actually do the thinking behind this before you go into execution mode is so important. So that would always be my advice. And I find I'm not bashing agencies here, but they don't understand that they should be charging for planning. They charge for execution. They don't charge for planning. So they will almost throw planning in as something for free. You and I know that if something's free, it generally isn't always worth much, to be honest. So that is where consultants and consultancies have really owned that space. And I think that's the opportunity in 2021, is to pick up people of that ilk to come in and advise you on different channels, on your strategy, on how that works, and really nail down that blueprint. And that should be something you do. It's not a retainer. That's something you do as a project. This is something I've done a lot for companies as a project. I'll come into a company or other people, other partners. I have many other partners in Torque. So partners will kind of come into a company for a set period of time, establish that blueprint, do the auditing, do the due diligence, and really help establish what we're going to do before we start doing it. So we make sure we're going in the right direction. In terms of cost, I think actually, in terms of, you're in the US, I think the other opportunity at the moment is finding clever UK people to come and do that for US companies, because the differential in cost between the UK and the US at the moment is phenomenal. You're going to, as a US company, you're going to get a 30 to 40% discount in terms of equivalent services from someone in the US. That's what I've kind of found. For consultancy fees, I can give you a range. I would say that individual consultants in the US, you're probably talking around $1,000 to $1,500 per day. I would say it's about the range. You may, and that's always variable, because as a consultant, you would then, if you're doing a longer period or longer program, you would then have that discussion about what that rate for that program would be. But that's a kind of, ballpark figure. But I would say the amount of money that you would save, having gone through that planning process, would make up for that quite easily.
Search engine spam and big changes coming at Google. When we come back, stay with us. We're talking to Nick Wilsdon. He is a search marketing consultant at TorquePartnership who's been at it for 20 years. Nick, what is search engine spamming?
Oh, spamming. Oh, anything. It's always a question, isn't it? Because anything that changes the results in Google, unnaturally, that's going to be a very loaded answer, isn't it? Because Google doesn't like being gamed, do they? And if you're spamming the search engines, if you're doing certain things to get yourself up in the listings, to get a disproportionate amount of attention, it's a very grey area between spam and marketing. And largely, search engine spam has largely been centered around the question of links. And I think that's a fascinating area. I've worked with links before. I've obviously done link building. I don't think you could be an SEO for 20 years having not done link building. I'm lucky because at Enterprise, as you said previously, I don't need to do too much link building or any link building, actually, because those brands build their links quite naturally. So that's a kind of, I'm quite lucky and entitled to be able to kind of take a step back and not have to get too involved in the link building sphere. But I do find it fascinating. And I think the whole link building discussion has got very, very interesting in this last year, because we've started to talk about digital PR a lot. And I don't know how much you've heard about this. It's moving gradually. I think you're hearing more about this in the States. But it's been a big subject in UK and Europe for some time. And the idea behind that is that we would get links by producing content that we know PR companies or publications would be interested in. And then we would outreach to those publications to get them to link back to that piece of content. And then to your point earlier of your strategy, you would then, that highly linked page on your site would then be transferring internal link value to the rest of your site, whether you kind of set certain internal link anchors in that, or whether that link equity was just going through your navigation naturally. But that's the kind of the new way of link building. And what makes that interesting to me is that it's actually not something completely new. It's something that we've been doing for maybe, I was doing this 11, 12 years ago in the UK. But this is a high point for it because it's kind of reached a point of kind of acceptance that we can kind of build links in that way. And I think that's interesting for me as an old SEO, because essentially we're still gaming Google with that. Because you may not be paying for those links, but you may be paying someone else to reach out and get those links, or to take someone to dinner, or to send someone some stuff, or to, as PR firms operate. So this is a very grey area and really revolves around ethics. And I think that's why I find this whole conversation fascinating, because I've led and created link building and outreach teams for agencies. So this is a topic that you're constantly thinking about at that level of, how can we build links in a way that won't get penalties for our clients? And I think that's what you have to do. But yeah, it's a very interesting topic, link building. I find it absolutely fascinating, but I am very grateful that I don't have to be too involved in it now.
And of course, if you're listening to this and you're not an SEO, the reason links are so significant is because Google treats links like recommendations and assigns rank accordingly. But you mentioned that there are some risks. Is there a risk to gaining backlinks too quickly?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because with everything, Google's tried to make sure that you can't game their system. So they will watch certain patterns that are happening. And if you gain, it depends. In terms of gaining links too quickly, it depends. Because if you think about a page on a telco that may be selling the new iPhone, that page would naturally get links very quickly. So the link graph behind that kind of content will naturally shoot up because the people are excited, the iPhone, the device is coming out, and that kind of content will be a natural pattern. So with everything in link building, does it look like a natural pattern is a question that you have to ask yourself. So if I'm going to get a lot of links and I've never had any links on my site before, and I suddenly get 1,000 links that day, it would seem a bit strange. And this is why very large sites can get lots of links very quickly to certain parts of their site, because it happens to them all the time, and they're trusted. They're an authority website. So this comes into the other aspects of Google in terms of, how do these things balance? How do these factors balance? How trusted is your website? How many links that you usually get? What's a usual link graph for somebody in that space? How many links do your competitors get? And I think my advice to anyone building links is try to, if you are orchestrating it in a way that, it's not just happening to you, then always think about what looks natural. I think that always has to be the advice. And you look into your competitors, you look into your niche, you look into your history of your domain, and you see, what is a natural acquisition of links. So yeah, with digital PR equally, digital PR is a good way of reaching out to publications to get them to talk about your brand. But if you had a very high number of links coming in all of a sudden from that kind of method, I would be a little bit nervous. And what you do find sometimes when that happens is Google reacts to it. So you might suddenly go up a lot, and then suddenly you'll shoot back down again, because Google's kind of reconsidering, and it's having a think about your site. Should it be getting these many links? Does this look natural? This is where we see some of these more interesting patterns.
Search engine optimization is an art and a science. And on the quantitative side, there are a number of different tools that get used, one of which is a free tool called Google Search Console. And they're now measuring core web vitals. And these are three things. These are what they call the largest contentful paint. And that's how long it takes a page to render the largest visible element in the portion of the browser that you can see. So, you go to a web page, how long does it take for different sections of the page to pop into your browser? The second thing they're measuring is called first input delay. So if you click on a button, or you try to expand something, how long does it take for the page to respond to that? And the third is cumulative layout shift. So how many times have you been to a web page and it starts to load, and you try to click on something, and right when you go to click on it, the button moves and you click on the wrong thing as it's loaded. And so they're measuring these things. They call them core web vitals. And they're saying that they're going to start to take this into an account as part of their algorithm and how they rank content. How important is it for small businesses to get these issues handled?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think there's been a lot of talk about performance and page speed over the last few years. Obviously the driver to all of this is the update that's meant to be happening in May in terms of the experience update from Google. So Google said that they will start to take these factors into consideration within the ranking. So previously to this, we've kind of had a point where if you had an incredibly slow site, bad things might happen to that page, because Google doesn't want to have a slow experience. It doesn't want to have a slow experience for people on mobile, especially. So, but this experience update is certainly going to kind of ratchet that up. And I don't think it's going to be a sort of, we talked about Mobigeddon before, that it's not going to be the Armageddon of everything. So it is an important thing, but it's more of a journey in order to get your site to perform well on those kind of metrics. It's not something you're going to do overnight. I mean, if you have a WordPress site or something like this, then this is something you could bring in an expert, and they could be optimizing your WordPress site very efficiently. And that may be something you can do far faster. And there's sort of Nitro is one of the plugins that people are using really to, I'll give you some links to that. So yeah, if you have a much smaller site, and this is something you can really get your head around very fast. And with everything in terms of changes, that's always going to be your secret weapon. It's going to be the fact that you can move fast. You can move faster than large enterprise, and you can get these things done, and you can get a first mover advantage. So that's always something you should grab as a small business. For larger sites, it's going to be a little bit more complex. There's going to be development changes that need to be made. There's going to be, it's going to be a lot of work to basically move you to that point where you're performing really well on Web Vitals. So it is important. I think it's important for users as well, because we talk a lot about Google and Google ranking, but let's be honest, if it's a slow website, especially on mobile, users won't stick around. So you're also improving something for your users, and that can never be a waste of time. But I don't think we're going to see with that update. That update's not going to come out, and then the next week, all of those fast sites that get 100% score on Lighthouse are going to pop up to the top of the rankings. That's not going to happen. And I think Google's confirmed that.
So it's easy to find someone to build a house for you. But it's really hard to find someone to, fix a drain or do a small little odd job. It's real easy to find a general contractor. It's difficult to find a handyman. And there are so many small businesses out there that need help fixing these types of things, or just ironing out some of the more technical details of something like a WordPress site. So what advice do you have for small business owners that are looking to find reliable WordPress developers?
Yeah, they absolutely are out there. And I think I've had some fantastic people work with me on WordPress, and what tends to happen for those kind of people, the ones that you're mentioning, they get a core group of clients, and they're not out on the market very much. And this is the issue. So the first thing is always recommendations. I would always go to people and get personal recommendations. I think that's the best way, because you've got that personal touch. They've worked previously in the same way as a plumber. I mean, we do this for repairing our houses, don't we? We talk to our friends, we talk to our family, we try and work out which plumber they've had in their house, what was the experience. So I think that has to be the first thing you do. And often that can surface someone who can help. The second thing is, understand the kind of person that you want. Is it someone who's going to be very self-starting? Or are they going to be someone who you tell exactly what to do? They do tasks, and they'll get them done for you. And I've worked with both types of people at that level, and they're both great. But you just need to recognise what their strengths are, because often the problem that you get in terms of that relationship is often a communication breakdown, because they expect that person to be a self-starter, and they may not be pushing to fix things proactively. So, think about how you can encourage them to do that. How can you put them on a retainer? So they're on a retainer, and that's always the best way to have a WordPress handyman, is on a retainer. Don't just try to bring them in when things are broken. It's the worst time to employ someone. So find someone who will give you a retainer, who will understand that when something significantly happens bad to your site, they're going to step up and they're going to come in, they're going to help fix it, whatever it takes. It's almost like an insurance policy. And those tend to be the best relationships I have with kind of, WordPress developers. And I find that works quite well. And then you can decide then, what can that person do? What are their strengths? Are they solely in WordPress? Are they just the technical developer for WordPress? Because that may be the kind of person you need. Do you need someone on content? Do you need someone to help you with SEO? But you may find that they aren't all the same person, and you need some sort of specialist help. And this is where it comes, I explained to you before about creating the blueprint for enterprise. And you can actually take that same methodology for a small site as well. You could have somebody who came in, assessed what you needed to do on SEO, and then gave you a blueprint that you then delivered to that person to implement, because it would be, set up Yoast, optimize these posts, make sure we got these keywords covered, make sure we got these pieces of content on our site. So, there's always, I think there's a lot of value in sometimes paying an expert for a blueprint. And I know that sounds terribly obvious, but it's funny how many times I see that just doesn't happen. So, just get the right person in for a very short amount of time, and they will tell you what you need to be thinking about. Then you can give that to someone else to deploy.
Excellent advice from Nick Wilsdon, consultant at TorquePartnership. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
To master B2B lead generation, you can listen to the first chapter of my new book, The Digital Pivot, for free at digitalpivotbook.com.